is the rapture real? Because there is no word called rapture in the Bible. And if the believers will be raptured by God, then when will we be raptured? How will we know the signs for it? And what about the tribulation? Are there two tribulations or just one? And if one, then how long will be the tribulation? Will the church go through the tribulation? Brother Sam shares some things about this in his clip. Let's first see the clip and then we'll see the final answers from the Bible. And this is going to remove all your confusion about this topic, as we'll be taking scriptures which directly talk about this in the Bible.
But if you actually read 1 Thessalonians 4, 13, 18, and don't stop and continue to chapter 5, because Paul continues the theme in chapter 5, it says, this will happen when the day of the Lord comes like a thief in the night. But according to 2 Peter chapter 3, the day of the Lord that comes like a thief in the night is when the Lord comes down to destroy the earth by fire.
The first thing that you should know is that Bible never talks about a 7-year period of tribulation. Nowhere. In Daniel 9:27 it says, and he, the Antichrist, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And 1 week is actually 7 years. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So there will be a 7-year treaty which the Antichrist will make with Israel and other nations. And during the first half of this 7 years, life will go on as usual, and there will be normal life. People will be given in marriage and taken in marriage. And the daily sacrifice of Jews will continue in the temple in Jerusalem. But in the middle of this, meaning after the 3.5 years, he will break the treaty and stop the daily sacrifice. Now something else will start in the midst of this 7 years treaty. This is the beginning of the tribulation period. The only tribulation period called the Great Tribulation in the New Testament. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus is speaking here. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophets, stand in that holy place. And it continues and says, for then shall be great tribulation. So he's talking about the Great Tribulation. Such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor shall ever be. So notice Jesus is saying, when you shall see the abomination of desolation. And previously in Daniel we saw that the Antichrist will cause the daily sacrifice to stop. So these two events happen together. The abomination of desolation being set up in the temple and the stopping of daily sacrifice. These two events happen together at the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Because in Daniel 12:11 it says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away and the abomination that make a desolation set up. So from these two events, there shall be 1,290 days. So from these two events, which is 3.5 years, which is also half of the 7 years treaty of the Antichrist. From the starting of the tribulation until the day of the Lord or the day of wrath will be 1,290 days. Now until now, during the tribulation, there has been no mention of rapture. There has been no mention that the people of God will be taken away. They are still on earth. They are facing deadly persecution during the tribulation, but the people of God are still on earth. But now comes the day of the Lord, or the final day of wrath of God. But before this event, the church must be first united with Christ, so as to fight together on earth the final battle against the armies of the nations. Paul talks about this event in 1 Corinthians. Behold, I shew you a great mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. Then again Paul says in 1 Thessalonians, for this we say unto you by the Logos of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not precede them which are asleep. So here Paul is saying that all believers who are alive until the day of the Lord, until the second coming of Christ, meaning we who are alive until that day, shall not precede in resurrection the people who are already fallen asleep. And he is talking about those people who have fallen asleep during the tribulation period. Then it says, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. And notice in verse 15, it says, unto the coming of the Lord. Then again Paul confirms in the same context in chapter 5:1, but of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. And so Paul is talking about the times and season of the events which he just mentioned in chapter 4, which is about the day of the Lord. Then again in verse 4, Paul again confirms that the day should not overtake you as a thief. So he's confirming that he's talking about the day of the Lord, or the second coming of Christ. The same day is mentioned by Jesus in Matthew 24. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, and now he's talking about the day of the Lord, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. Notice it says immediately after the tribulation of those days. And those days, like we saw earlier, are 1290 days, which is 3.5 years. Then again it says in Mark, but in those days after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. So here again it says after that tribulation. Then it says in Mark, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Now some would say, what about those verses where Jesus said one will be taken and the other left? What about those people? Well, if you read in Luke 17, it says, in that day, that is the day of the Lord, he which is upon the housetop and his stuff in the house, let him not come down to take it away. I tell you, in that night there shall be 2 men in one bed, the one shall be taken and the other left. Notice it says in that night. So the day of the Lord will come during night time, or when it is dark. So when Jesus was telling about all these things, one shall be taken and the other left, his disciples asked him, where, Lord? And he said unto them, wheresoever the body is, thither the vultures be gathered together. So Jesus is saying that these people who are taken will be taken to a place where the vultures are gathered together. And consider, this is the same context of Jesus talking about the day of the Lord. So this event happens during the day of the Lord. These people are taken during the day of the Lord. And these people are taken to be killed in the winepress of God, as it says in Revelation 14. And another angel came out of the temple crying, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of earth is ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the wine of the earth, and cast it into the winepress of the wrath of God. Here the wine are the people of the earth, which are taken by the angel of the Lord to be killed in the winepress of the wrath of God. Hope you now see the series of events that will take place, that the church will not be removed from earth during the tribulation, and the believers will remain until the day of the Lord during the tribulation period. But before this battle happens on that day, the church will go to meet the Lord in the air along with other saints whom the Lord will bring along from heaven. And these will come, they will all gather together in the air to fight against the armies of the earth, to fight against the nations. And this all happens on the day of the Lord. So yes, Jesus will pick up his church, but it shall be on the day of the Lord. It shall not be before, it shall not be during the tribulation, but it shall be lifted after the tribulation. And they will not go to heaven. They will join the Lord with his saints in the air to fight with the armies of the world. If you still have any queries, don't hesitate to comment and let me know. And remember, at Avi, love values you.